know that Jesus loves us all.
Amen.
But while he was living here in this world, he spent most of his time with the 12 apostles. And 3 of those guys, Peter, James, and John, were his best friends. Maybe he liked their aggressive nature. Peter was always speaking his mind, and James and John were called sons of thunder. Or maybe they shared common interests. Or maybe they were closer in age. Well, whatever the reason, Jesus, like us, had his friends, and he had his best friends. Matthew chapter 17 has an amazing and unique story with his 3 best friends. And we call this story the Transfiguration. To transfigure means to change or alter your appearance. And in the account that we're going to look at today, not only does Jesus' physical body change, but he's seen with Moses and Elijah. The purpose of this very different story, which seems to be a scene enacted just for his 3 best friends, is to offer encouragement to them. And it paints a very different portrait of Christ than the one we'll soon have of him on the cross. Follow along as I read Matthew chapter 17, beginning in verse 1. Matthew chapter 17, beginning in verse 1. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. "Get up," he said, "don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The disciples asked him, "Why then do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus replied, "To be sure, Elijah comes and will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, and have done to him everything they wished. In the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist. Matthew tells us the Transfiguration occurred 6 days after the events in chapter 16. So for a week, Jesus has been teaching the apostles about his upcoming death and resurrection. This whole time, they have been north of the Sea of Galilee in the town of Caesarea Philippi, a town primarily made up of Gentiles, where the apostles were able to receive uninterrupted teaching and time with Jesus. The Gentiles weren't interested in these Jewish people, so they were left alone. The Bible tells us that Jesus and his 3 best friends went up a high mountain by themselves. Although Jesus was always very purposeful in the things he did, I don't think there was any reason for Peter, James, and John to think this side trip was anything more than a quiet getaway. Maybe they thought they could spend some more time with him in prayer and get the chance to ask Jesus some questions. But it could well have been that the 4 buddies were just going camping for the weekend, while the rest of the apostles took care of their own business and hung out with their friends. It's not clear what mountain Jesus, Peter, James, and John went up, but it seems only natural to assume they went up Mount Hermon, a very high mountain located next to Caesarea Philippi, where they had been staying. Now we're told that Jesus was glowing like the sun and shining as white as light. This seems to be saying he was reflecting God's glory. Now by itself, seeing Jesus glowing would have been very impressive, but the 3 apostles immediately saw 2 other people with Jesus, Moses and Elijah. Now we're not told how they knew it was Moses and Elijah. They probably were not wearing, "Hi, my name is." Moses and Elijah, remember, lived generations before any of them, and there was no pictures of Moses and Elijah. Perhaps Jesus called them by name while they were talking and they heard it. Or maybe by the things they said, the apostles just knew who they were. This may also be a glimpse into what it'll be like in heaven. We're told in heaven that we'll know each other, although according to the Bible also, we will all be changed. Peter suggests they make shelters for the 3 men. Now by shelter, Peter did not mean a place for them to sleep for the night, but a tabernacle or a marker, kind of like the historic markers that dot the landscape here in Virginia. I was driving yesterday, and I think I saw a landmark sign every mile or so on the road as I was going along. Peter wanted to commemorate the appearance of Moses and Elijah on this mountain. Peter knew this was an historic event, and he was suggesting the building of shrines so others would come and be in awe of the place like he was. What's interesting is no one responds to Peter's suggestion. No one says anything to him. Instead, a bright cloud fills the area, and a voice from the cloud, obviously the voice of God, using similar words he had spoken at Jesus' baptism, affirmed Jesus as his beloved Son. Now, it's believed this cloud was like a thick fog, and you could not see your hand in front of your face. So naturally, if you heard a booming voice coming from nowhere in this dense fog, you would fall on your face in fear. Later, as the 4 friends descended the mountain, Jesus will tell them not to tell anyone about what they saw. This is not the first time Jesus tells them not to spread the news of what they saw or to tell others. Here, he kind of explains why. No one needed to know until after the resurrection when God's plan would be completely revealed. Then, not only could they tell others what they saw, but Jesus would encourage them to spread the story. After all the teachings and miracles they have seen finally, after the transfiguration, the disciples believed that Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah. But they had a question. They had always heard, and they'd been taught, Elijah was to come again before the Messiah. They had just now seen Elijah, which would mean he came after Jesus. So Jesus explained to them Elijah had actually already come in the form of John the Baptist. Now, there are questions about why Moses and Elijah were the ones appearing with Jesus on the mountain. It's one of those deep theological events with subtle meaning, which can, if you're not well versed in Old Testament thinking, make your head spin. Even Peter, at first, who knew his Old Testament well, missed the symbolism of what was happening. Among other things, Moses was the one who brought the law to the people of Israel, remember? And Elijah has always been a symbol for the prophet of God. Together, they represent the law and the prophets. And all the law and the prophets lead to Jesus, who is the fulfillment of what God wants. Now, all of what I just said may be interesting history and some informative background, but you may be asking yourself, what does this have to do with me? Well, for the rest of my sermon this morning, I want to focus on just 2 verses, verses 7 and 8, and see how this story can have meaning for us. Let's look at those 2 verses again. Verses 7 and 8 of Matthew chapter 17. But Jesus came and touched them. Get up, he said, don't be afraid. When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. Remember the old Gaither song, He Touched Me? Shackled by a heavy burden, neath the load of guilt and shame. Then the hand of Jesus touched me, and now I am no longer the same. Since I met this blessed Savior, since He cleansed and made me whole, I will never cease to praise Him. I'll shout it while eternity rolls. He touched me, Oh, he touched me. And oh, the joy that floods my soul. Something happened. And now I know. He touched me and made me whole. When Jesus touched Peter, James, and John, who were lying on the ground in fear, suddenly everything changed. No longer were they engulfed in a cloud, and no longer were they seeing these strange sights, but now they were comforted and restored by Jesus. They would never be the same again, and neither will we when the hand of Jesus touches us. Three things happened after Jesus touched them. Two were words of instruction and comfort from Jesus, and one was a result of the touch. So this morning, let's consider these three things this morning as we think about how Jesus has touched us. First, Jesus told Peter, James, and John to get up. Simply to get up. You see, the disciples were terrified. They had never seen anything like this. And all they could do was to fall face down on the ground, paralyzed with fear. Have you ever felt that way? Have the cares and worries of this life so overwhelmed you to the point you do not know which way to turn? And you simply freeze up, unable to do anything. Franklin Roosevelt inspired a generation when he uttered the famous words, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." However, we still often find ourselves frozen and not knowing how to handle or overcome the dangers and fears we face. Therefore, the best solution is simply to get up and do something. Anything. Just get up. Telling his friends to get up was actually a common instruction Jesus gave. You see, living a Christian life is a verb. It's an action. It's something we do. Getting up is putting our faith into action. Will Rogers said, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. I think there's a reason why Peter was not rebuked for suggesting 3 shelters he built. Making a shrine, making a memorial, a historic marker, missed the point of what Jesus was trying to do. But at least Peter was trying to do something. At least I, often have a fear if I try something, it'll be wrong. So I don't even try. One thing we don't want to do is anger God by messing up or getting it wrong, do we? However, as Jesus' non-response to Peter here suggests, even though it was wrong, at least God appreciates his effort. I say God appreciates his effort, his sincere attempts as an encouragement for us to get up. We all know what we need to be doing. We need to read our Bibles more. We need to pray more. We need to invite our neighbor or friend or family member to church. Well, get up and do it. We need to volunteer to help. We need to start giving more money. We need to become more involved with church activities. Get up and do it. There's a danger, you see, in trying to maintain our comfort zone. And the danger is we miss out on better things God has in mind for us. Peter, James, and John almost missed the opportunity here. For the most part, they were lying on the ground out of fear, but they stayed there even after the cloud lifted and the voice stopped talking. What do you think that was? They were laying there on the ground, and Jesus started talking to them, and they continued to lay there. Well, now they realized, they were in God's presence. And when you're in God's presence, you don't want to leave where God's at all. Because, you see, actually none of us want to leave a place we know God is at. We would rather stay on the mountaintop instead of going down to work in the valley. Nothing wrong with desiring to be with God, except we have work to do in the valley. It's time to get up and go to work. Next, Jesus told Peter, James, and John, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. What are you afraid of? In 1975, poodles were the most popular purebred dog in America. There were 139,750 purebred poodles registered in the United States. At that time, 1975, there were only 952 registered Rottweilers, a fierce breed often used as a guard dog. So by 1994, the poodle population had been cut in half to 61,775. But Rottweilers had increased 100 times to 102,596. Someone said, if you aren't afraid, then you aren't paying attention. So how do we have the courage not to be afraid? How do we do that? On September 10th, 2001, a New York City fireman was injured on the job. The doctors told him he needed to take a couple weeks off to heal from the minor but irritating injury he had. The next morning, the fireman heard on the radio about the airplane that hit the World Trade Center. Immediately, by reflex, he drove to the nearest fire station, but by the time he got there, everyone had already left to go help. Hearing a second plane had struck the building and realizing this was a premeditated attack, the fireman grabbed some gear, wrote a note apologizing for taking someone else's equipment, and hurried downtown. Smoke and flying debris were everywhere. People were screaming and running in panic, but this fireman bravely entered the building to help people out. After bringing one group out, he went in again. After safely depositing the second group, he entered a third time, just as the World Trade Center collapsed. He died in the debris. Sadly, the source I found the story and did not include this brave man's name, even though I'm sure more research could find it. Still, he's a hero we rightly honor and never forget. But what made him unafraid? He had been injured the day before, and no one expected him to go to work or to be there on September 11th. There was no one at the station to assign him a job or tell him where to go, but he bravely went into the inferno, although everyone else was running away, and gave his life to save others. His courage stemmed not so much from a lack of fear, but a clear focus on what he should be doing. That's how we overcome our fear. Do we know what we should be doing? We have work to do right here in Sterling. And we do it not because we're special or heroic or brave. We do it because it's the right thing to do. By and large, sharing the gospel or telling others about Jesus is still not dangerous work for us here. It's not like we're in some godless culture who eat missionaries for lunch or throw us in jail because we say the name Jesus. The worst we can expect is ridicule. People making fun of us because we are Christians. There are those who will look down their noses at us because of what we believe and probably brush us off as no more than ignorant bumpkins. Maybe being made fun of does not compare to being tortured or dying for our faith. But it is our reality. And it's just as painful to us, isn't it? No one wants to be made fun of. And no one wants people to misunderstand or criticize them. There is always the fear of being shamed. So what keeps us focused? What makes us unafraid? It has little to do with personal courage or determination, and everything to do with the third point this morning. You see, when they got up, Peter, James, and John saw no one but Jesus. Saw no one but Jesus. We get sidetracked so easily. When they come to church, do we see Jesus or do we see who is here or not here? Too often, I'm afraid, we see each other more than we see our Savior. Now, ideally, when others see us, they should see Jesus. But in reality, it often doesn't happen, does it? There's a story about a rash of petty thefts at a lumber mill. The authorities hired guards to search all the workers as they left the factory. The first evening, a man came out with a wheelbarrow carrying a large, bulky sack. All right, the guard said, what do you have in the sack? Oh, just some sawdust and wood chips, the man answered. Well, I wasn't born yesterday, the guard replied. Open the sack and dump out what's inside. The man did, and all that came out was sawdust and wood chips. So the man was allowed to put it all back in the bag and go home. The next night, the guard confronted the same man with another bag and a wheelbarrow. Again, he had the man dump out the contents, and when he saw it was just sawdust and wood chips, he let the man repack his bag and go home. This scene repeated itself night after night after night. And the guard became so frustrated because he couldn't figure out why this man was hauling out sawdust and wood chips every night. So finally the guard said, I know you must be smuggling something out of here. Tell me what it is, and I'll let you go. Wheelbarrows, the man said. Wheelbarrows. When people come to our church, do they see Jesus? Or are they distracted by something else? Do they feel they are in the presence of God? Or do they only see bickering and people that don't care if they are here or not? How can anyone come to Jesus unless they see Him? And how can they see Him unless we introduce them? What do you see this morning? My prayer is you do not see me, or Leon, or Larry, or anyone else here who may take your eyes off Jesus. I pray you do not see the flaws in our building or the holes in our programs, but only Jesus. And may we all, instead of building shelters or monuments to ourselves, see only Jesus when we enter this place. So how do we get up? Not be afraid. And see Jesus. The songwriter was right when she wrote, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory.